Hi, I'm Samuel C. Spitali, author of How to Win the War on Truth. In this video, we'll look at the truth about Hitler, Trump, and Godwin's Law. Created by Michael Godwin in 1990, Godwin's Law states that the longer an argument goes on, the more likely someone is to make a comparison to Adolf Hitler or Nazis. Since Donald Trump entered politics in 2015, the comparisons between him and Hitler have been frequent, and not just because Trump purportedly kept a book of Hitler's speeches at his bedside. Steve Bannon, Trump's chief political strategist, once compared Trump's descent down an escalator to announce his presidential run to Hitler's introduction in Leni Riefenstahl's propaganda film, Triumph of the Will, where Hitler enters descending a staircase. Time magazine echoed the sentiment when they featured a 2016 cover of Trump that mirrored a 1941 Time cover of Hitler. Even German Chancellor Angela Merkel acknowledged the similarity when she said that only one other political leader held rallies like Trump's. So, are Trump and Hitler kindred spirits, or is all the talk merely Godwin's Law at work? According to historians, the two political figures have more in common than one might think. Both claimed to be Christian, both exhibited narcissistic behavior, both were known to be misogynists, both were social elitists obsessed with media and celebrity, both were conspiracy theorists, both were hostile to democracy and liberalism, both worshiped power and frequently praised fascist regimes and dictators, both despised judges, lawyers, and both held the law in low regard. Both voiced scorn for intellectuals and experts. During the Trump presidency, over 100,000 civil servants left, retired, or were fired as Trump rid himself of experts and critics within the government. Both had a complex about not needing to learn anything, yet both were deeply insecure about their own lack of knowledge. Both hated being laughed at, but enjoyed it when others were the butt of the joke. Both performed mocking impressions of people they disliked. Both promised to make their country great again, and both mythologized their nation's past. Both were demagogues who appealed to public emotions rather than intellect, infamously exploiting people's fear, anger, and resentment. Both had followers composed primarily of rural Protestants, who were dismissed as hicks by the rest of the country and were susceptible to authoritarianism. Both promoted tribalism, casting their followers as lawful citizens and outgroups as lawless criminals whose behavior posed a threat to the nation. Both inspired followers to engage in violent behavior, and when they did, both defended their actions. After declining for 25 years, hate crimes began increasing in 2015 during Trump's presidential campaign. Cities where Trump had held rallies saw a 226% rise in hate crimes. White supremacists and anti-Semitic groups were so emboldened by Trump's victory in 2016 that in the 10 days after the election, there were 867 hate incidents that invoked his name. Both race-baited, promoted white supremacy, and echoed the playbook of the KKK. A 2016 study found that 62% of Trump's retweets were of white supremacists. Both referred to their political opponents as vermin. Both had contempt for immigrants and claimed they were poisoning the blood of their country. Before 2020, Trump had demonized immigrants some 500 times at his rallies, repeatedly describing them as predators, criminals, killers, animals, and aliens, just as Hitler and the Nazis described Jews as rats, cockroaches, vultures, and lice. Both relied on their followers to believe things that were verifiably untrue. Both used lies as weapons, blaming their enemies for lying while simultaneously lying themselves for political gain. In his 4 years in office, Trump was caught lying over 30,000 times. Both promoted themselves as the only solution to political deadlock that was manufactured by the right wing to maintain power. Both were dismissed by opponents as a joke for their crude speeches and tacky rallies. Both were thought to be blustering idiots by their fellow conservative elites, who thought they could be used for their own political power, so they pandered to both them and their rabid followers. Those peers repeatedly underestimated them and failed to realize that ignorance and incompetence wasn't enough to stand in the way of their ambition. Of the 293 Republicans who were serving in the Senate or House when Donald Trump was inaugurated, close to half were gone 4 years later. Some lost their races, but most of the turnover was from members of Congress who voluntarily retired, especially moderates fed up with the GOP's Trump-influenced direction. Both relied on gut feelings to make decisions. Both thought they were infallible and smarter than their advisors and generals. Both surrounded themselves with yes-men and lashed out at anyone who corrected them. Both were incapable of challenging their misperceptions, and both ignored information that contradicted them. Both hated having to read paperwork and would make important decisions without looking at the documents their aides had prepared. Both were really bad at running the government. Both had a government that was constantly in chaos, with officials pulling out their hair. Both led an administration full of infighting and backstabbing, an attempt to either win their favor or avoid their wrath. Trump's White House saw an astonishing 43% turnover among senior staff in its first year, compared to 9% for Barack Obama and only 6% for George W. Bush. Both had administrations that successfully rolled back the ethical rules of office. Trump had more prosecutions in his first 3 years in office than any president in American history. Both were incredibly lazy and wouldn't do much before lunch other than see what the news said about them. Both frequently left the seat of government for their private retreats to avoid work. Trump spent a quarter of his time in office out of office, spending $142 million in taxpayer dollars playing golf 285 times in 4 years, compared to Obama's $96 million in travel expenses over 8 years. Most of what the public thought of both of them was propaganda, including their public image, business prowess, leadership, expertise, and competence. When media outlets criticized them, both claimed the press was conspiring against them. Hitler called the press the lying press, while Trump called the press fake news. Both defamed journalists as enemies of the people. Both felt disrespected and treated unfairly and had many scores to settle, i.e., retribution. And neither ever won a popular election. Few of these behaviors were secret or unknown, and it's partly why so many people failed to take both Hitler and Trump seriously until it was too late. In 2015, Godwin himself addressed the Hitler-Trump comparison. If you're thoughtful about it and show some real awareness of history, go ahead and refer to Hitler or Nazis when you talk about Trump. But what do you think? Leave your comments below. To read more about the similarities between Hitler and Trump, check out these titles, and of course, my own book, How to Win the War on Truth. Special thanks to Alan Wincup for the illustrations, and thank you for watching.